So there are a couple topics I want to address. First of all, I want to explain why I write my own exams and why I don't use a test bank. I hope some of you eventually go on to graduate school. And in graduate school, the thing you want more than anything in the world is to get a research assistantship, because your goal is eventually to write a thesis. And by doing a research assistantship, you're partnering with faculty members who will help you write your thesis, will help you get anyhow, it's the best way to get your PhD is to get a research assistantship. It also pays the best. So yay. If you can't get a research assistantship, then you go for a teaching assistantship. And so when I was in graduate school, I was a TA, teaching assistant. I loved it. And back then, at the University of Iowa, teaching assistants literally taught the class. So for the Fundamentals of Management course that my UAU students had at University of Iowa was called Principles of Management, and I was the only one my students saw. And so it was kind of weird that here is this 22-year-old standing in front of people who are pretty much exactly the same age as he is, but I'm the professor, technically instructor, but they didn't see anybody but me. Now at the University of Iowa, they have a faculty member because a lot of parents complained about that in Iowa. And so now if you go to the University of Iowa, you're going to have a professor teach the course, but then the person in the teaching assistant does like the breakout rooms, whatever. I'm glad I didn't do that, because I did that as an undergrad. I didn't need to do that in graduate school. So anyhow, research assistant, best. Teaching assistant, second best. But then if you're a graduate student and you can't get either of those gigs, then there are faculty members who write textbooks. And so they are willing to pay people who are willing to write questions that will go into the test bank for their book. Trust me on this. The people who get that job hate their lives, because they're not getting paid much at all. They're literally getting paid per question they write. So test bank questions are being written by people who don't like their jobs. So when I have used a test bank in the past, I can tell you from experience that at least 50% of the questions in the test banks are bad questions. It's hard. Like sometimes I'll find questions that I'm like, the book didn't actually even cover this. And yet there's a test question about a topic the book didn't even cover. And so when I did use test bank questions, I was very careful to weed out the questions that were not good. I've come to write my own test questions because I know that the question I'm asking was covered in class, because I taught it myself and I know it was covered. I don't believe in any surprises, and so I don't think students should have to study materials beyond what was covered in class, even though, as I may have told you, I had a sociology professor who assigned us a book to read on the side. He never once spoke about it in class, and then when it came time for the midterm, he asked an essay question about the book, and I was like, that seems totally reasonable. I am in college, and a professor doesn't have to cover everything that I'm tested on, but okay. You will notice in Blackboard that you will see everything as points, okay? And every one of those points, if you just move the decimal point, that's how many marks you have in the class. So this first quiz was worth 15 marks, but you'll see it in Blackboard as 150 points. At the end of the semester, you will see that all the points add up to 1,000 points. So if you want to know what your grade is in the class, you just move the decimal point over. So if you have 930 points, that means you have 93%. That's what's going to be turned in on eService. If you see, 810 points, then that's 81. Now, I promise you, in all of my years of submitting grades, So I always have students who are like, can we get a bonus? Can we get what can you do? Whatever. And it just gives me a headache. So here's my promise to you. At UAU, a grade that ends with a 0, and there's grades that end with a 7, and there's a grade that ends with a 4. Never in my history of teaching have I given an 89, an 86, or an 83. If the person is within 1 mark of the next upgrade, they get that grade automatically, because I know myself well enough to know that there's a decent chance I screwed up somewhere, and so they automatically get that next upgrade. Yeah, I think that's a good place to just end. If you have questions on this, ask in class. I'm happy to explain why I do what I do. I think test banks are terrible. I understand why my colleagues use them, but I'll do my best not to use them.